welcome everybody to the first 2022 meeting that we're having as part of the Urbana Sustainability Advisory Commission. Just like to take the opportunity to wish everybody a happy new year, even though we're already into February. Thanks for joining tonight. Will Scott go ahead and please call the roll?
Tomas Delgado, Madeline Garbaz, Stacy,
here. Sorry.
I
was reaching for the mute button. I'm sorry.
No worries. I was going too fast. Stacy Gloss.
Present.
Jessica Lemcool.
Here.
Andrew Stump.
Here.
Morgan White.
Here.
Grace Wilkin.
Here.
Okay, we do have a quorum, so we'll go ahead and get started, and maybe Tomas will join us in a little bit. In your packet, you would have received the minutes from the previous meeting. And I just want to go ahead and make sure that that is in the packet. From December, yes, it is. Okay, from December of 2021. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from December 7th?
I'll motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
All right, fabulous. Are there any edits or discussion on the minutes? All righty, not hearing any. We'll do another roll call vote. Will staff please call the roll?
Madeline Garbaz.
Yes.
Stacy Gloss.
Yes.
Jessica Lemcool.
Yes.
Andrew Stump.
Yes.
Morgan White.
Yes.
Grace Wilkin.
Yes.
Okay, fabulous. That unanimously passes. I do apologize. I usually have a couple of screens in front of me, so I am just toggling a little bit back and forth between files and the screen so I can see folks tonight. So let me just get back to the agenda. Are there any additions to the agenda this evening?
I was going to propose that we switch the order of unfinished and new business per how people feel about that.
I like that idea where we would have the discussion about the council's what are they called? Strategic point goals first. I agree. That seems more timely.
I agree as well. Is there any further discussion or objection to that change to the agenda? Okay, fabulous. Not hearing any. And we will go ahead and we'll make that change. If we get to that part of the meeting and I start saying like, oh, let's do old business, just remind me. And we'll take it from there. I'm just gonna try and see if anybody has joined the call that would like to provide public comment. I see that there is an attendee. Nope, it's just the camera operator. Okay, so not seeing any attendees in the meeting. We'll go ahead and move on to the staff report.
Good evening, Commission. The city will very shortly be announcing the launch of Geothermal Urbana-Champaign 2.0 with another bulk purchase round of geothermal systems in Champaign, Piatt, and Vermilion counties. And we'll be announcing a first batch of geothermal power hours for people to join and learn all about geothermal energy and what they can do to get be a savvy consumer of geothermal installations. So the website there is geothermaluc.org. I'm happy to share that we have done a qualifications-based selection for another landfill solar developer for evaluating the balance of land not used at the Urbana closed landfill for another solar development. There's no certainties here. We're going to be working with the solar developer to identify and pursue state incentives and off-takers of the power and see if there's a commercially viable project there. The Landscape Recycling Center has accepted a bid to construct a concrete bin for composting food scraps at the center. This is going to be a limited pilot project where we'll be accepting pre-consumer commercially generated food scrap, which will be delivered to the LRC through a private hauler hired by the generators. We will compost that food scrap in the bin and then move it over to finish with the rest of the leaf compost and ultimately become screen garden compost. So we'll be moving. Yes.
Do you know approximately how, sort of what scale, I don't know, pounds or participants that pilot will be?
No, it depends on how many interested generators there are. We're going to be working to attract a small number of larger generators for this pilot project, but it really depends on who's interested and what commercial enterprises are interested.
Do you know what capacity the installation will have?
Not off the top of my head. We have specifications, but I don't have it off the top of my head. We'll also be developing, our protocols about how we handle this material as we go. If it composts faster or slower, obviously, that increases or decreases your throughput through that initial stage of the facility.
Okay, thanks.
Staff's been doing some public engagement, spoke to a natural resources and environmental sciences class recently, have a couple more speaking engagements with some classes at the university talking about sustainability, energy and climate issues, and how the city of Urbana is addressing those. U-Cycle is working on an upcoming household hazardous waste collection event that'll be in Champaign County in April of this year. And then there's going to be a registration, as we've been doing for a number of years, limited number of slots so that we can get a lot of people in a short period of time. So look for that. We'll also have residential electronics collection event in May, and locations to be determined and registration details forthcoming. U-Cycle is doing their annual hauler survey. Haulers are required to report certain volumes of waste and recycling hauled, and so we use that for annual statistics. So we're getting those in from licensed haulers. And finally, U-Cycle has posted a request for a proposal for curbside bagged leaf collection. That's the bagged leaves that people put on the curb and get delivered to the LRC for composting. You may recall we had to insource that service last fall as we did not get any bids from any licensed haulers. And so we're going to be soliciting that service again this spring. And it's a 1 week service in the spring. So we'll see if we get any bidders for that this year. When we insource it, we have to rent a garbage truck, a packer truck, and also pull crews off of other road maintenance details. So it's a significant operation to insource. And then the balance of the report here, the typical funding sources, we're going to talk about, I think, in the agenda item. Is that correct? The goals. So I think I'll just wait on that and just say that the next SAC meeting would be March 1st at 7 p.m.
I think that totally works. Does anyone have any questions or comments about the staff report through this point? Go ahead, Grace.
Thanks. I thought there was interesting questions that Maureen was bringing up about the compost pad size. I feel like that might be interesting and useful calculations that I'm happy to help on, but that like we're limited to 10% or less of the leaf compost volume. So find like, what is that? What is our upper limit of volume we can accept? And then the size of the pad and what volume we can have. It is definitely a moving target because the compost is decomposing, so always kind of changing volume. But we could kind of get a rough estimate just to make sure that we're getting the appropriate amount of food generated. And I think, like Scott said, we're still working on recruiting and in kind of the early serious phases of that. So I don't think we're going to exceed it, but there will probably be interested numbers just to keep in mind.
I just have a question because Grace, you're kind of referring it to a ground pad, and then in Scott's report, he talked about it being a concrete bin. So I have two different pictures in mind. Can you have clarification?
So the construction is a concrete slab with concrete blocks on 3 sides.
Okay, so sort of, is it similar to the one that's over in Meadowbrook Park?
I couldn't tell you.
Okay.
I don't have an image of that in my head.
I think I know what you're talking about, and I think somewhat like that, but probably bigger. What's the estimate on this? It's like 10 by 20 feet or something. It's pretty large.
Yeah, maybe 20 by 30. The spec is actually on the city website. It's closed, but it's on the city website in detail.
Sounds good. Thanks. All right. Any other questions? Yep.
Were we going to talk about the case study for the thing in this part?
I just put it in as information, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I appreciate seeing it all laid out. And I did have a question about where and I think actually, so first question, I think we've asked you this already, so I apologize, but vacant tree site is one that would be fit for a tree, even if it's never had one or formally been identified as a tree site. Is that right?
Vacant tree site is a geocoded point on a map, and the map is publicly available. Let's see if my internet will internet. But it's a specific points on a map that we've already determined are good sites to plant a tree at some time in the future.
Okay, thank you. And so my other question is about the close-up view. I was having a hard time reading the streets on those to like put them into perspective on the larger view, like figures 5 and 6, the close-up of the trees that were planted. I was trying to like overlay those on the bigger map, but I couldn't read the street intersections.
Yeah, I'm not getting the city website to load right now, and I would show you much more interesting visuals in those stills.
And is that under the like SAC page, or where is that on?
If you go to the city website and keyword search tree keeper, all one word, you can get a link to, it'll go off the city website. Okay, things are loading now.
Grace, on the top image on figure 5, that sort of playfield area in the upper left is Booker T. Washington School. If that gives you some placement, it's like kind of the edge of that school. And then the other side of that top image is Goodwin Avenue. The north side is Beardsley. And on the other image, it's the school in the corner is the Urbana Middle School. And the road on the left side is Vine Street.
Yeah, there are some street names if you look closely. So in the north, on the image, figure 5, I think we're looking at, you can see Dublin in there, Dublin Street, and what's the north south?
Are you able to do a screen share, either one of you?
I'm actually trying to get the full map open, but it's not loading the city website.
I'm having trouble from here loading the city website as well. I think there's something going on with the server.
Yeah.
I can do a screen share. Would you like me to? Well,
go ahead. If
possibly plus the other one.
Yeah.
So this is, I'm zooming in and out. So please let me know if I should slow down. But this is these are the two images I was just describing. So Grace was asking about figure 5 in this document. That is the case study for the tree analysis. And over here is Booker T. Washington School. And then this road here is Goodwin Avenue. I don't know, it might veer a little bit around there. And then on this one, this is the Urbana Middle School. And this is Vine Street. I don't know if you guys can see the sort of hand moving around on the image there.
Mm-hmm.
And the bottom here is Florida Avenue. And then, so that's figure 6. So then I was trying to, find this, what Grace had brought up was sort of comparing this image. I'm going to zoom in. This image where you can see the vacant sites that were planted and the vacant sites that remain. Planted are yellow, if I'm reading this correctly, and the remaining vacant sites are white. And these are all along streets. Or I guess looks like there's some in the park, but they're primarily street trees. And then zooming back out on the previous page, this is the temperature on different areas. And I always find Vine Street by following Cunningham. So here's Vine Street right in here. And zoom in. So this is very, very, very likely the middle school because there's all that pavement there. Is that right?
It's actually the AstroTurf football field.
The AstroTurf. Okay, so this is the middle school, but this is probably Vine Street right here. So this area, approximately. I know that this is Florida because of that cemetery cutout. So here's Florida. Vine. So this is that one. And then let's see. Wright Street. Is Goodwin. I guess this is Goodwin here. So then is this the area of the other one here, I believe? Or maybe. Sorry, I don't know that part. Looking at the railroad tracks, that's where this must be Lincoln. So this is probably a good one. That's the best I could do.
Yeah, I've got Tree Keeper up now if you all want to look at that.
Yeah.
So this is a third-party platform we use. I think the university uses it. The Urbana Park District uses it. And so we use this as a live active inventory for managing the urban canopy street trees. And the green are planted and the gray are vacant, current vacants. Now, the vacants do change from time to time. This inventory was done in one fell swoop by a vendor. So from time to time, the city arborist is out there in the real world and decides actually that's, for whatever reason, right away is too small or something. That's not a good site for a tree, and it becomes one that we're not going to plant. And then from time to time, there's a site, perhaps this block where there's no vacants, but the city arborist might decide actually we should put some trees there, and they become a vacant that we then plant at some point. So we have about, I think the numbers are like 11, 12,000 planted trees that are assets that the city arborist maintains, and about 4,000 vacant tree sites.
Thank you. And is there an overlay? Like, will that show the trees that were recently planted?
We don't have that level of detail in the public facing. That's a search, how to say it, a query that the city arborist can run a bunch of different queries on the database, on the version that, the pro user version database that he has access to. So he can query those, and that's how he produced those maps that are in that case study. What there is on this public facing is the temperature heat map, which is kind of, well, let's see if it looks good. Hold on. Let me zoom out.
You know where the
You
temperature
can kind of see it.
data comes from, Scott?
That's satellite and land surface temperature data.
Oh,
So, what might be relevant is to actually turn off the planted streets and look at the vacants relative to the land surface temperature. So they're actually not all that correlated. It's really seems to be correlated with, you can see the AstroTurf football field here. You can see a lot of roof here at Lincoln Square, and then wide roads and wide intersections.
I'm going to ask a very wide-ranging hypothetical question. Has the city kind of considered, with all of the vacant sites, whether it's 4,000, maybe 4,000, whatever the number is, doing like a tree planting blitz with all of those sites all at once, and what that might possibly cost? I'm wondering if there's federal funding through the, not through the CARES Act anymore, but through some of the infrastructure bill, and through some other climate funds that could be utilized for a project at this scale.
You can do the math at home. We got bids last fall. We're going to bid again, and hopefully the prices will come back down. But last fall, contract tree planting was $1,000 a tree times 4,000.
How many trees were included in the bid?
Probably on the order of 75. One of the reasons that it's very expensive to contract tree plant, and even to order 75 trees to be delivered that, say, we would internally plant with our own staff, is we don't order 50 of this and 25 50 oak and 25 maple. We order an enormous diversity of tree species because we are working to spread our bets on family genus species in our urban forest, so that if a disease kills all of the white oak or whatever it might be, that's a small portion of our total canopy. But that's expensive for a vendor to pick out a bunch of different species. And so that's just a trade-off that we accept, because diversity is really important for strength of our urban forest.
Sort of a back of the envelope, if those numbers came down to $500 per tree for 4,000, and assuming that you could get some sort of scaling on the diversity side of things, because then you're not picking out one of each times 4,000, you're picking out dozens and dozens of each to come up to that level. Maybe $2 million.
It's $2 million at $500 a tree.
Mm-hmm. So
even if you could, there's still a consideration. One of the things we want in addition to diversity of species is diversity of age. So we don't want to hit a year where, a ton of trees were all planted at once and now they're all dying at once. So it's good to have age diversity as well, so that we just have a steady churn of we're planting trees every year and we're removing trees every year. It would be great to start approaching zero in terms of the vacants that we have. That would be a fantastic, ambitious goal. We are, now that emerald ash borer removals are, mostly in the past, we are making ground again. We're planting more every year than we're removing, but, not at any rate that we're ever going to close that gap.
without sufficient funding.
Without a lot of, additional funding, sure. I mean, on a long enough timeline, if we plant more than we remove, of course, we eventually close that gap and approach zero, but not on a timeline that anybody can think about.
Thank you. Any other questions on Tree Keeper?
I mentioned the other challenge with, while it's great to plant more than we remove every year, the other challenge there is that's increasing the assets that the Arbor Division has to maintain, but we haven't been increasing the maintenance resources, equipment, staff, funding, and at some point, you can only stretch the existing resources so far.
Okay, thanks so much for going a little bit into the presentation. Will the presentation be put on the website sort of separately or just in the packet as part of the meeting minutes? Like the presentation
the case study?
Yeah, the tree study, could that go in with like a tree webpage?
I think that's a great idea. We do have a tree related web page on the city site. I don't think I posted this, but that's a great idea.
Okay, thank you so much.
I would say it looks like Jess got kicked off and is in the attendee. If she could get back as a panelist. Jess Lumpcool.
Scott, could you possibly check with the UPTV? See if they're around. There we go. Okay, we'll give Scott just a second more, and then what we're going to do is we're going to move into the part of the staff report. Sorry about that, Scott. Are you sort of ready to go into the part of the staff report that was looking at funding for sustainability?
Sure.
Didn't need to run all around. They got it.
Did you want me to just launch into that?
Is there any, I don't know.
Maybe it might be helpful for Grace to kind of frame up this council goals in general, and then we can dig into that in specific.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm happy to do that. Yeah, I can provide some little context. I'll share if I can. Do you see that? All right. Okay, thanks. So this was in our packet. This is publicly available, our memo from a few weeks ago on the council website. It's on there. We had some strategic goal setting. That's something that's done every few years. We had a facilitator come in, and it was really helpful to kind of keep us on task and lay things out. So we narrowed it down to 4 strategic areas. So the way this was set up, our lingo was strategic areas, and then a strategy, and then an action item. And so this is a draft. What actually got approved so far was the 4 strategic areas, but council's still working on finishing up the action items and the strategies. So those are still in the works. But I think the overall strategies are there. We're figuring out the action items. So in here, you have this Excel sheet, but that's actually kind of harder to see. So I'm going to show you this. And I think lays out a little better. It just doesn't set the resources as well. So this is the strategic area, the strategies, and then the action items, and who's the responsible department or party, and then what's the time frame for doing that. So this is, again, the draft for all of them, but what is relevant to this conversation is the one on infrastructure category. And we have a whole strategy on expanding green infrastructure within the community, but I think also city, the whole kind of area. So the action items there are to explore possible locations for EV funding and infrastructure, evaluate options for incorporating sustainable technologies and stuff into city buildings and operations. And then the key one here that we were thinking of talking about more today is exploring green revenue, or possibly tax revenue. Like we had talked about the idea of a plastic bag tax or something that could go into possibly also having a green revolving fund, which, if you're not familiar, is kind of a seed money pool of funds that can be used for the upfront expenses for sustainability projects, and then the savings from those projects go back into the fund. So this is kind of tasked to Public Works, Scott's job for sure, kind of up this alley, but also with the support from us as SAC. We were trying to work with getting the commissions more involved in city stuff. So this is kind of a in the works of a draft. The mayor may officially ask, but this is kind of, we got volunteered through me on this because I thought that we'd be a good group to help out with this kind of initiative. And then we also have other departments, and we were hoping to kind of have the exploration, which is still pretty vague. These action items are vague enough that they can be kind of what we make them. It might be a more or less formal report or presentation, just kind of exploring what this could look like within this calendar year. And connected.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Question when you're ready.
Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry. So all 3 of these are evaluate, explore. It's kind of in the research realm, and those are important stages. But a lot of times, in order to actually achieve change, we need to set goals that are actual changes. I'm wondering if any of these could be restated, like the first one, identify priority locations and for electric vehicle infrastructure, and research potential funding sources, or potential strategies for installing them. Because I know it's not. It's sort of like, what is the sort of deliverable out of this? And I would love it if we could include in these goals something that would include the change. So establish a green revolving fund. I mean, even if we had, I'd put in $100 there, we've established a $100 fund, right? And then, but establish a fund and identify potential sources for increasing the revenue or the funds available in that. But get it created and start finding things that can go into it. So it's more impactful. than the discussions and reviews and consideration. And I don't know, I didn't read the action steps on the other goals. If that's like the best, if that's what the council is wanting, is this sort of investigative version. I understand that. I know that's, when we don't have resources, we can't say put resources towards something. But, I just would really like it to be more direct. I'm curious about the word, on a slightly different subject. I'm curious about the word green. When we are the Sustainability Advisory Commission, can we just say sustainable infrastructure, or is it, how does that terminology play out?
And another area, I think, Morgan, just on that term green infrastructure, is that in some circles, green infrastructure is looking at specific assets to deal with water and sort of water and sewer and dealing with overflow and runoff. So just there can be some fuzziness around that. And I agree with what Morgan is saying. I also agree 100% with the terminology to be more impactful would be to set goals around these parameters rather than just studying them.
We already have a goal that we don't know if we can achieve, which is the net zero or clean. Sorry, I can't quote it, but the clean energy goal for the campus or for the city.
Carbon neutral by 2040, I think it is.
2040, right? So we have that goal. So maybe one of the specific actions is, I know there's intentions to get another fire facility. Why not achieve LEED certification for the next fire building, fire station?
Yes, thank you for the input. I think those are good points, and you're welcome to share them, especially I think this is a key time because they are still in a draft phase. So I also welcome you to, email or speak at the, I think we're meeting February 22nd in the evening to finalize these, but you can also shoot an email anytime. And we can also see if we're interested of saying something as like SAC as a collective. I think that they are kept vague on purpose, and I don't know that at this level it's gonna go for any more specific, because also the people who are actually going to be following through with these things aren't the ones also at the planning table necessarily, so they do have to be kind of vague. Like, for example, Scott was not at those discussions, so I feel like the only reason this one's on there is because I happen to be in the infrastructure one. So I feel like this was a big push just to even start exploring and evaluating kind of these options to have them as part of our goals. So I think people are on board, but I don't know that we're going to be more specific unless we can say, like, we as the SAC and Scott, like, we think that this is how we're going to accomplish this. So I think they were kept kind of vague so that it fits in there. Like if the list of identifying priority spots for EVs kind of falls under explore, but we didn't want to dictate exactly how to do it because the people who are going to be performing it weren't really a part of that conversation yet.
Can you tell me a little bit more about how these priorities are coming about for the strategic areas? Maybe one of the concerns I have that may be fully alleviated because I don't have the full picture is that, like, so these look great as strategic areas. I'm wondering, are these just the strategic areas that are coming up from council and the mayor so far? Or are there deeper discussions with community members and experts and organizations locally that have expertise in some of these areas in order to help identify the action steps?
I think so far it was council, mayor, and head staff, we kind of had like representatives from the heads of various departments within the city. And through that kind of planning process came up with these. We had public input, at the meetings, but there was not not very many people in attendance on those evenings. And we've also, always do through email. And RPC gave an interesting presentation with some stuff they've gathered from the comprehensive plan and some of our other pinpoints. But I think that, yes, we still can always use more input from the community, individuals or organizations. I think this was mostly generated through council and from what they've already heard from the public, and staff on what they think is reasonable and some of the needs.
And perhaps even just from the commissions themselves. I mean, I'll admit this is, you brought it up so we could add it as an agenda item for tonight. And that is wonderful. If you hadn't brought this to us as a commission, I kind of don't know how we would have found out about it in another way. The commissions are a huge resource for, or should be viewed as a huge resource for the council and the mayor, I think, in order to really put a finer point on what is possible and figure things out. Another question that I have is, there's a whole Imagine Urbana process kind of happening in the background, and I don't know when that is necessarily going to be done, but are there themes in these strategic areas that were coming out of the Imagine Urbana project that are sort of getting incorporated into these strategic areas?
Yes, I will also say we lost Jess again and needs to be re-promoted. And so, yes, that's what I was talking about with the comp plan is Imagine Urbana. I think is the same thing, just with different names there, what we're talking about. A presentation from what they gave to Regional Planning Commission talking about spending the ARPA money. And these 4 strategic areas were 4 of the 6 areas that they identified within that community survey.
Okay, great.
And I also agree that I think that more working with the commissions would be wonderful. I think that is great. We've got, volunteers and often experts here ready to help. And I think more coordination would be great. I think that's something to take up with the mayor, because ultimately the commissions are under the mayor. They're not under council. Like I said, it is helpful when sometimes some commissions have a designated council representative to kind of keep that connection. This one just kind of circumstantially happened that way. But I think ultimately it is under the responsibility and authority of the mayor, all of the boards and commissions, which there are a lot. It's a big job. But ultimately, council is not the one over the commissions.
A little more context, the Imagine Urbana process will result in a pathway for Urbana for the next 40 years. Council goals is more of a pathway for the next 4 years. And what council is working on is not choosing what is good to do, but rather among the 100 things that would be good to do, what are the 6 or 8 that we have time and money and ability to focus on in the next 4 years?
Yeah, I agree. And the timeline, we were establishing these for kind of the next 1 to 2 years. So I'm thinking that we'll maybe have a next goal setting kind of midterm. A lot of ours did end up being more 1 year kind of projects, but with the reality of things, they'll probably get pushed back and we'll be working on them for 2 years.
I have another question. So I'm wondering, as far as how the action steps, or is there or should there be a connection between sort of the ongoing work, and I recognize, Grace, that you were saying that Scott wasn't part of that direct conversation, which I understand, but the work that Scott's office is doing, such as the piloting compost at the Landscape Recycling Center and seeking to add solar on the closed landfill. I know at the U of I, we like to have these sort of existing efforts included as something that are supported by as you get sort of the staff level work have it be recognized in the goals. So it could be, complete launch the pilot for composting. Because even though it is happening, it is, I think, very beneficial to include it here so that it, when it gets to that next stage of, well, how did the pilot go, right? That if it's on this list, then when, December 2022 comes around, then the council can say, hey, we want to know. And they'll be asking, how did that go? As opposed to us saying, hey, we did this great thing. Can you check it out, please? So I'd like to see those items included in the actions if that's an option, if that's possible.
And we still have Jess as an attendee. I just don't want her to miss out opportunities if she has some things to add.
And can I just get clarity also? Are we, is this discussion something that, we would need to make make a motion to send a message from SAC about these items, or is this, and maybe this is a question for Scott when he gets back to his computer. But, is this more something that can be shared through the staff, or what's the process? Because I know I'm not available to attend the council meetings myself, but we're having the conversation. How does it then get to the process?
I agree. I have the same question as well. And also maybe just what would be the most useful. I didn't write down the timeline here, but Grace, it sounded like kind of some of these decisions are going to be made before the end of the month. I don't know if that was your timeline, but we won't have another SAC meeting if we were going to draft a resolution in order to take some sort of action in writing as the SAC to say, we support this or we want X to be included.
Yeah, I don't know that a resolution or anything is required because this is a list of strategic goals. This is not an ordinance in the first place. And yes, I believe February 22nd we're meeting to pass that, and that's a big pushback. They were planning to just pass them all last week or 2 weeks ago, so it was relatively quick turnaround. Also had 6 months of delay in starting the planning process. That's usually done more at the beginning of a term. So I think the best way would be to either individually or coordinated as SAC. I think just email council and the mayor would be the most direct way. If Scott is coming to those meetings, I think that would be another avenue. I don't know that he is. I'm happy to pass along some, input from them or from you all to that conversation. But I think just directly getting it out there, I think an email or speaking at a council meeting during public input would be effective ways to get that message across.
I would be happy to send an email, kind of as chair of SAC and on behalf of SAC. If folks on this call would want to email me directly any comments that you have, I will compile those and send those. Also, absolutely feel free as a member of the commission and a member of the public to also contact the mayor's office and city council on your own if you would prefer to do that. But I would be happy to compile and make that public comment from SAC at the meeting on the 22nd, or if it should be done before that, I just need to know. If it should be a public comment at the next meeting, for example. Grace, I don't know when this is going to be on the city council agenda again.
It won't be on the agenda again until we finalize them and then pass the final version. But I would recommend, as soon as possible at a council meeting. I think beforehand would be most helpful instead of at the meeting, just to give people some time to digest and consider it more thoroughly.
Okay, so that at the earliest would be maybe next Monday.
Yeah, or the following. We're not that far into February. We've got a few weeks. Yeah. And I will just say again, I think that there is kind of the understanding that we are keeping them vague on intentionally. And like, I hear what you're saying on more specific ones, and we could see if there's a place to incorporate those underneath them. I think the thought was like for the second one, evaluate options for incorporating sustainable stuff on city-owned properties, that does include the work at the landfill and the other things that are going on. It was just a group of people who are looking at it on a really big picture without specifying all the little things. So I think the check back, for did we evaluate those options would be, yes, we're doing these things and we're evaluating, can we expand further, like with this assessment and with these things, can we go more? So I hear what you're saying, they could be more actionable, but I think they are.
Or even like, complete one more or something like that. Just something like that.
Just a little bit more context. This is not the capital improvement plan. That's a different document. That's specific. That's a list of projects. This is higher level. This is what are our topical priorities for extra effort. Does that sound fair, Grace?
I think that sounds great. I also, coming from the university perspective, just when we see the word, and Morgan said it probably more eloquently, I don't know why I'm necessarily repeating it, when we see the word explore or evaluate, then it's like sometimes my personal knee-jerk reaction to that, my personal reaction is, okay, great. So now that it's explored, it's shelved, or we check the box that we explored this. Yay, congratulations, that's great. That got explored. But then nothing further necessarily will come from it. And that's the concern, I think.
That's my concern. Yeah.
Language.
I want a goal that says do something more so than think about doing something.
However, I will also add that right now the landscape for EV infrastructure in Illinois is like a huge deal. It's coming from CEJA, the Clean Energy Jobs Act. And so working with those who are knowledgeable at the state level about those opportunities so that we don't miss those opportunities is something that I think is going to fall on staff or members of the public or commissions that are like, hey, here's the flag. This is what we need to do. And this is the timeline that we need to do it in. Now was a really interesting time on codes, for example, on number 2. So the IECC energy codes are updated in Illinois every 3 years. And Illinois, I believe, pegs following energy codes so that municipalities are supposed to adopt those codes a year after the latest. So that's sort of coming out now. And I think based on the conference that I'm just attending this week, I'm currently at the Midwest Energy Efficiency Solutions Conference put on by the Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance. We're sort of hearing things like at this conference about how stretch codes are going to be incorporated into the state code. So there's some digging to do there, but we have amazing assets in our own backyard with the Smart Energy Design Assistance Center on campus. They have the state contract through the Illinois EPA to provide training on codes. So they're going to be our experts. They're located in Champaign that can definitely work on stuff like that. I know that CDAC also works with municipalities frequently in climate action planning, climate resiliency projects. And I'm sure that some experts over there would be really excited to have a call from Urbana for possible, partnerships within the community and to see what we could do with that. I think that we also have, a lot of feathers in our cap with the solar projects that we're already doing. I know that we're already using our kind of solar program down here from the community solar aspect, from Solar UC. We're kind of propping that up in some work that we're doing in other parts of the state as a model for what other communities can be doing. So we are very forward thinking. So I'm excited about things, and thank you for bringing them to us. Grace, I didn't have a chance while you were sharing your screen. I'm really interested in seeing what the housing specific strategies were going to be, because I also, if you want to just go up to housing.
Yeah, and again, they were in the packet. I can send this version that's a little more readable than the Excel one. And this is also on the city website. In some of the recent meetings, there's clickable links.
Great. Yeah, I was definitely interested. I know that there's home funds. Something else that I would just add here that can even be added to the website could be a list of current tax incentives and rebates on energy efficiency programs that are currently existing. That could just even be, that's an easy lift. That's pretty low hanging fruit in terms of just putting some public information out there, providing a little more information to residents about what the homes program is. And then something else, I don't know if there's a 7 in that list, if this could be added to it. So there's a coming down the road, and I don't know exactly what the details are, but currently we have like Community Development Block Grant Funds, CDBG funding. There's going to be an Energy Efficiency Development Block Grant that's going to come through from federal to the states. It goes through the state energy programs and is going to get passed on onto cities. I don't know what the formula is and how much funding that Urbana will receive from that, but that's definitely something to look into and to put on the radar. Again, it's the Energy Efficiency block grant program. That's, I don't know that I think it's tied to infrastructure. I don't think it's necessarily only if Build Back Better passes, for example. But that's going to be kind of important. And something else to tie in with this from a municipal scale on housing in particular is that people are turned down for weatherization when they have problems in the home that weatherization can't address. So these are like roof replacements or mold in the home, other moisture issues. And these are areas where cities, municipalities can partner on some minor home repair program or even major home repair programs that can address these major issues before weatherization can be done. And I would love to see some sort of partnership between weatherization and the city that can begin to address that. There are some houses that just, they need more assistance than what weatherization can provide, and that there are funds that can come through municipalities that can get us there. So, all right, thank you so much.
Grace, I had a question. Was there a previous set of strategies that were being worked on? Or is it just a new, I don't remember if I saw them last time or 4 years ago or 3 years ago.
So it's what, were there a different set of goals, or how have they changed?
Yeah, or I guess the question would be, are they new goals for this time, or are they, or are there some of them that were previous goals that have been carried over?
I don't remember what the old goals were off the top of my head. I don't think that they were heavily factored into this conversation.
Okay.
The city council's been producing this goals procedure and document for the entire time I've worked here, so at least 10 years. And I did go back and check the mayor's newsletter in December talked about this goal setting procedure process. And so it's a good newsletter to subscribe to stay connected with announcements like that.
Yeah, and I encourage any input again to like go through those, and if you have any input to pass that along to council and the mayor before that conversation, if you'd like.
Awesome, thank you. And can you send this to Scott, or just, yeah, send it to Scott and he can send the document out to the full group after the meeting?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say sorry for being MIA for a while. I don't know what was happening with my computer. Fine as an attendee, not cool as a panelist. It just kept like freaking out. So I do understand like what everyone's saying with the explore word. We're the same way in education goals. Like what does that actually look like? But then I also feel after making our own goals, how hard it is to create goals for stuff that needs to happen, by 2020 or by 2040, or, when you think about all the stuff that needs to happen very soon, and then you're like, well, we don't really have money for this. So I do appreciate that those things are on the forefront, and just thankful that Grace shared them. And it's just kind of a tough situation sometimes when we're trying to get stuff done, and it's not like we have, full-time jobs or enough people to get all the stuff done that needs to be done. So yes. And on the tree thing, because I was so gone for so long that I couldn't participate. Sorry. I was thinking about, and I know I brought this up before, like a tree giveaway, and I randomly stayed at an Airbnb in Potomac this weekend. And the owner actually orders from the state nursery. Have we ever heard of this? In Macon. There they sell native trees for like 50 cents a pop or something, depending on the tree, 50 cents, $1, $2. And that could be a cool thing. Maybe we can't, get all 4,000 trees planted that need, that we have spaces for, but we could improve the canopy by, inviting private citizens to plant trees at either a free or cheap rate. So this would be, maybe a down the road, but just throwing it out there. I guess the sale is next Monday and they sell out really fast. So maybe for next year. So sorry, that's all.
Good question. And I didn't know if you want to keep going down this route because, or if we want to stop and kind of evaluate the input from these goals in general and then see about diving more into them at a later time. So what I mean, like, for example, like Scott was going to share that part of his staff report that has the kind of exploring green tax revenue that the city already has in a sense, but that it's already part of the general fund, and kind of thinking about what could be expanded, what could probably maybe be allocated, what probably can't be reallocated. So I didn't know if we want to kind of wait to get into the details of that after exploring what you think about these goals and action items themselves first.
I have a comment just on the electric vehicle action item. So maybe if I could share that. The U of I has a plan to establish a electric vehicle task force. And we do know that there are community members and advocates for EV charging that we intend to include in that task force. We're going to ask our sort of the people from the city staff who are already engaged in the campus's Illinois Climate Action Plan efforts. So city staff members who are on the resilience ICAP team for campus, if they would participate in the electric vehicle task force and look at electric vehicle charging infrastructure and other potential incentives from the sort of whole urbanized area standpoint. We're just getting ready to request additional participants to be on that committee that has not been formed yet. We did one a few years ago. We want to start it again and expand it to the community to identify what ought to happen. So it's just aligned with it aligns well. But I want, if it were going to change to a very specific action, it could be participate in a discussion with the university and the other cities about to establish a vision for electric vehicle charging station in our community, something like that.
Grace, are you looking for any other feedback for what you've shared on the screen at this point?
No, I don't think so. I think that encourage your feedback going through it all and sharing that as we see fit.
Great. All right, it is 8:00. I am Scott. Let me know how you feel about skipping over the budget piece so that we can finalize the remainder of the presentation from Grace and Jess on some of our own goal planning that we've been working on as part of SAC.
That's fine. It's up to you.
Okay. So I think maybe let's hold off on the budgeting piece. I think folks can review it in the staff report. And if you have any questions about the budget piece that Scott has shared in the staff report, then you can email him directly to ask the question. And I will review it as well. I don't know, just let me make sure that this is like kind of correct. I don't think, well, should feedback that we're giving to City Council on the priorities for the strategic planning process go as deep as to make suggestions about budgetary items or anything related to the budget that Scott has presented?
I think those would probably be separate things. I think that that's like a sub piece starting on the action of it.
Okay, so kind of a next step, but not necessarily necessary at this point. Because that's the only thing that would make me say like, hey, let's continue down this path. Let's explore this budget if we needed to go ahead and make some sort of comment about budgeting to City Council within the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I don't think so because that's something that we're not quite planning out yet either. Again, I would just remind you that this is really big picture for like the whole city as elected leadership of the city over the next year or two. And we've got, really big important areas that infrastructure is also along with public health and safety, housing, and economic development. So there's a lot of really big pieces. And the budget has started to be a little bit of the conversation. That's what that Excel sheet talks about, what resources may already exist. There are plenty of goals on here that don't have funding yet that we still need to figure out, or that they might not happen, but we're kind of as a way of saying, this is what we kind of can, majority agree on the things that we want to work towards as an overall direction. And so I think that the funding piece kind of starts to come secondary attached to that.
Okay, sounds good. So I'm going to wrap up this part of the conversation, and we will move into what should be the final installment of review of the JEDI goals that we've set as part of SAC.
All right. Grace, do you feel like sharing your screen with the Google Doc? And then possibly, I think the best way to go about this would be to just give everyone editing permission on this in actual Google Drive or Google Docs so that people can just make changes to stuff. So, I mean, this is not any new information. This is just a concise bringing a plan on a page based on what everyone signed up to do, based on goals that have been stated. So all we need to do is just fill in any blanks. And if we are, if our name is next to a goal, being okay with how it's written, what it is, the timeline. A lot of this is just kind of what, Grace and I were like, oh, this seems like a reasonable timeline. So you should change it for what works for you in your life kind of thing, is what we were thinking. Grace, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that sounds good, except for that I'm just trying to find the Googleable one. And do people have the link for that yet?
I think what I can do if I still have everyone's emails, I can just go to it. I think it was on your drive, but you initially created it, but I can just go to it and just add everyone's email to it so that they can edit it. Sorry, this child just keeps making noises.
I think I did that. So I found the Google thing. I did share with all these people. I could also email the link to Scott. That'd be helpful. Okay.
Okay, I just went into my Google Drive and I searched for just Grace's email address and it did come up for me. So I don't know, maybe if others can do the same. I see that Scott is in, Jess is in, Grace is in, and I'm in.
I emailed the shareable, editable link to you guys, Scott and Stacy, just because I didn't have a quick list of everyone's emails. If
Stacey, I also just reshared it with you. So if you go in your recent in your drive, it's along the left. It'll be the top thing. And I just shared it with Scott as well. And I think I have Morgan and Andrew.
Can you remind me what it's called? What's like the name of it?
Jedi goals, like plan on a page, I think.
Goals.
Table doc. There you go. Mm-hmm.
I'm just emailing it to Scott. Might be doing it as well. Okay, I forwarded the link to Maddie, Morgan, and Andy to all of the versions of your email addresses that I have for you.
While people are coming on, I think in line with that of kind of action items and goals, Jess and I worked on kind of paring down the table as it was and using the Jamboard and some of our sticky note processes that we did. And so the ones that made it on the table are ones that had either quite a few or at least the most green sticky notes for a go and some with pink ones for volunteering. And that's kind of how this came together. And there are still some gaps and question marks and a few missing pieces here that we were hoping that we could fill in together, especially if it was something that you recognize as like an idea that came from you on the Jamboard or other ideas that you might have on how to fill in the gaps in this and what you think of it so far.
So we could kind of, it's just this bit that we're looking at here. So we could just quickly go through it and, use, lose, change here together as a group, or, since it is a Google Doc thing, people can just edit the things that they had volunteered for, whatever works best for people.
Yep, I'm just going through it. Let's give everybody a few minutes to review what's here. And if they want to start making comments, they can go ahead and do so. But let's just give folks a few minutes to review so we can kind of reacclimate ourselves to the plan that's before us. And then we can come back together and we can discuss. And I also see, the first one is me and Andy and it's blank. So we'll go ahead and I'll propose some stuff to put in there.
What is the class associated with the third row in city operations? UIUC class.
I don't think we were sure, and that's why it was just put in like that. We thought that this was something that was that work with Public Works to evaluate and possibly update city codes, land, like that second goal. I think we were thinking was being done with the class or something, but could be completely wrong on that. If that's like inaccurate or anything's inaccurate, just slash it. You know, if your name's next to something that you don't think it's that, you know, like you can't do, or yeah, just feel free to just make changes.
This is such a small thing, but I want it to look all nice and uniform. How do you make the small bullet points that you guys are doing? Because I am struggling with that.
If it gets messed up, like don't even worry about that, because we can just go back and fix it. And honestly, like this is maybe more of kind of a working document for us. If we want something more public facing, we can simplify even further.
Okay, awesome. Yeah.
To post to a website.
I didn't want to make like work for somebody else, so I just wanted to make sure.
You're so good, honey. We'll realign and make any formatting changes after.
I also wanted to just remind us that these are things that we plan on doing too. So remembering if things that they think that we are realistically able or willing or capable of doing in whatever time frame.
I want to ask if the objective around increasing green infrastructure in the city, public and private, is more related to climate change and carbon footprint.
More than what?
More than I guess my thing coming to mind is like sewer and water resources for dealing with, you know, runoff for high rain events, for example. I guess because the two bullet points that I'm seeing that are being added are around energy improvements. So energy efficiency, energy improvements. So to me that these are about reducing energy use and maybe increasing energy efficiency, reducing EUI, the kind of energy use index. That's not the right word, but kind of your energy footprint. So that these are more energy related.
I put those there because I was looking at the green tax revenue and the green revolving fund. I mean, the way I understand a revolving fund is that it has to have utility savings to be able to pay back projects, which means so a pollinator planting, for example, wouldn't typically pay for itself through reduced mowing. It reduces mowing, but it doesn't cover the cost of the installation and the maintenance usually. So a green revolving fund, in my mind, is for energy savings and water savings that can, you install low flow fixtures of some kind, and that saves water, and then that saved water cost goes back into the savings repay the revolving loan fund. So I added both of those in sort of as they show up as sub bullets because the way the bulleting format looks, but I was actually seeing them as sub bullets of the first bullet in that section.
And then also with regard to the revolving loan fund, I think it says it, but I just want to make sure that this is really strictly just within, it's internal to the city and internal for city projects. So not necessarily, or for city owned projects. So it's not something that a member of the public could come to and say, hey, I have this project. I would like to do this type of development. I would like a loan for this project. I would like to pay it back. So am I correct? It's internal to the city? And
so I wrote that whole bullet. I said city owned infrastructure because I believe in small steps. And I think that establishing how we would do it, how we would work it out, how we would use it within the city would be a good first step, kind of a launching pad for expanding it. And also one of the things we saw on campus was sort of the additional green funds other places. So there's a campus-wide revolving loan fund, and then there's one specifically at the Illini Union that is only for the projects within the Illini Union. So the city could get it set up for city infrastructure, and then others around the community could imitate it. We could get Kraft and Carl and Dart to create similar funds in their own space as an opportunity. Or alternatively, we could look for the city creating some sort of process that could manage something that the community could work with. But I think there might be more, there's sort of a deeper level of change needed in order to have one that the city runs, but is for others to use. I don't know what would be involved in that. So that's why I put city-owned infrastructure in the bullet.
I think it makes sense. I, again, just want to remind us to think about things that are within our power. Like, I don't see that SAC has the ability to establish a green revolving fund. So I want us to just kind of think about that, if these are things that we actually can and plan to do, or this is more of a list of things that we want to see in an ideal world. especially if we only,
Does it
have,
need to say advocate for the establishment of a green revolving loan fund?
I mean, it can say whatever. I mean, I think the first bullet point already, has explore the revenue and kind of stated as the council action item. If you want to be more specific than that, I think that's fine. I just want to keep in focus what are we actually going to do as us SAC members and Scott, not what do we want to see happening at the city level, but what do we actually plan to do?
Yes, that is definitely true. Like, this is not, that was the point of this, is like these are the things we're committed to doing, like within our power.
So I'm not joking. I'm ready to hand over $100 if the city can establish a place for me to put that $100, and that $100 could buy LED light bulbs. Let's get it, let's establish it. But I recognize that the place to put it is process. Hey, I see Scott is not on the link. So is he still there? I guess, Andy, he's in the room with you, right? But I mean, that one is a very straightforward thing, but on the back end of having an account to put it in and process to use it and making sure that we're not breaking any, legal aspects of financial management for the city, that's all on the staff side. So that's just one. There's so many things on here. I think your point, Grace, is really valid. We're advocates, we're commissioners, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I think we did try and keep things focused and narrowed down. So I love the input and all the streaming, and it seems like a lot of them are kind of getting more specific action items, which I think is kind of what we were envisioning. And I just want to make sure that we're not like ballooning back out into the big picture all over again after we've been spending like over a year now chipping away on what these are going to be from a broad sense. And I just worked so hard to condense it down somewhat into action items, and I just don't want to muddle it with all the big picture stuff again.
Yes. And to that point, I think the idea was this is kind of macro plan. And like, for instance, create and find educational resources to be shared with local middle and high schools for Earth Month and post on city website. Like, that's my individual plan with Grace. And I would probably, we have our own action steps aside from, that's a process that's going to take multiple steps. And I don't feel like it's necessary to necessarily put them all on this particular document. Unless that's what we're wanting to do, and it is like having like our whole kind of micro plan sussed out. But yes, and I'm just wondering, so if you like, is it pretty much true that all of these bullet points should be aligned left, that they're not like sub bullet points, or are they sub bullet points?
For me, yes, they should be all aligned left.
Okay.
I did have one sub bullet point, but I wrote before the point that I made sub bullet point, like in parentheses or something.
That's so good.
That's so
good. Thank you, honey.
Yeah.
That's very clear. I love it. Love it.
And then I want to see, I don't know that what I added under increased green infrastructure in the city, public and private, goes in this particular city operations space. But I would welcome the assistance from the rest of the commission to see where does this fit. I really do want to add, and so we'll work on this. This isn't like outside of my capacity to do some sort of presentation. I don't know that that's to the SAC or if it's going to be working on that from a community perspective. For multiple community leaders on Illinois stretch codes for new construction. So this gets into whether or not buildings are being built solar ready and EV ready. And then also looking at building energy standards for existing buildings and how we could start creating some sort of plan for meeting the energy reductions goals that that we need to have, we say we're going to, slash carbon emissions by 50% by 2050, while we might not need to necessarily be prescriptive in how every building gets there, there does need to be an expectation or some requirement that buildings do end up complying in some way. And the way to do that is by creating a requirement for some sort of benchmarking and baselining for looking at what is current usage, and then having buildings, whether that's just city, the university, private businesses, look at how to go about, on their own, reducing their energy footprint and measuring or monitoring that in the long term. So I don't think that we've really, we haven't really gone there yet in terms of, we've got these goals to reduce our carbon footprint. We know we need to do it by a certain date. We know that we've got these commitments, but we really haven't started the conversations yet on how we're going to get there. So I think that what I'm proposing and adding in this is definitely part of that discussion. And I just don't know if I should put it in city operations or somewhere else. It may be, go on.
Well, I think it goes well there, I would say, or like as a detailed one for the second bullet point. That's already kind of what I had in mind here with the city codes, land use, building, energy codes, et cetera, is those national updates and then other recommended ones that Scott and others at Public Works are aware of and is kind of in the process of starting to do. I think we still have a little time, but it needs to get done. So I think that's definitely on the radar, and it sounds like you maybe have even more information to share. So I think it could definitely go in that city operations and maybe a sub point under that second bullet point.
Okay. Yep. If you'd like to organize it that way, that would be great. And if you want to, and I will maybe just include my name in the column for who. I'm happy to work on those issues. I'd love to. Andy, on the first line, promoting SAC involvement in planning and zoning, are the 2 bullet points that I've added there the starting point for us?
Sure, yeah. I was trying to think of something else, but I don't know.
I think it's a little bit of discovery and building some relationships at this stage.
The other thing I was thinking of, should we ourselves educate ourselves on planning? Some of stuff?
Yeah, probably.
I don't know if that should be a bullet point or that's just.
Well, I guess that there's
something we'll do in the when we
that's
engage.
Gonna be hard. Yeah.
What about the last one? Doesn't have names, but I'm not really clear what that. It's not as straightforward to me as it might be to others. What does that mean? Improve assistance? What does that mean?
I think remembering from past meetings, the goal was to basically be able to give rain barrels for free to people who can't afford them. Is that kind of what it was? Rain barrels and compost instead of like spending $90 if people can't, getting some sort of fund so that we can just be giving them to the people that need them that can't afford them. I don't know. It was just on there.
Yeah, because I think it's a program that already happens. I think as most of us are familiar with. So I don't know. This was from the Jam Board. The Jam Board said improve assistance for rain barrel and compost bin program. I don't know if that means like the financial assistance or promoting it or whatever it might be. I think that it might be like collaborate with the rain barrel and compost program or something might be another word instead of approve assistance.
Could be expanding its reach, or I don't know. I've heard different ideas about that. We weren't sure. Also, there's no one signed up for it, so it could be a cut. There's a lot of big goals on there, and I think people are, just unfortunately, like I personally, don't have a whole career to dedicate to this, but and I'm sure other people are in similar boats, but wanting to dedicate as much time and energy as I have, you know.
It's like the bullet about the Illinois Solar for All could fit pretty well in the one a couple higher where it's got Andrew and me a little. The bottom bullet about, can I just move it? I'm gonna move it. Like that. And then the advertising, that aspect of it fits in the increase community involvement because it also has the social media presence. It depends on what happens with the improving assistance plan.
Well, if everyone is feeling good about these and feeling like these are reasonable timelines and you know, are still wanting to be signed up for the goals that we're signed up for, then I would say we're done. Right?
Yeah, I'm gonna put are we okay.
And I can stop sharing if we're done here. I just wanted to keep it shared while we were all working on something.
So could the last goal be SAC? Just a general, who's responsible for it?
I was thinking the same exact thing, Andy. So I'm glad that you said it. I think we could put that SAC in. That's just like, hey, in the spring, we can, if we have the bandwidth to assist, then we have the bandwidth to assist.
I wrote it.
I would like to explore with Scott. I mean, I think that he knows it is something that I've been saying, and I don't know, a couple of years in a row, that it would be awesome if we could create or have some sort of scholarship fund. Scholarship is the wrong word, but make the rain barrels available at free or reduced cost in order. I know they're already at a reduced cost, they're already pretty affordable, but not for everybody. As well as looking some of the additional implements that go along with that. Like, do you not have a hose, for example, in your garden? And or let's look at seeing if the community gardens, there's a significant kind of amount of work going on around the Solidarity Gardens projects that also are being worked on through or in partnership with the Cunningham Township. I'm thinking like Learman Garden as that comes to mind. I don't know if there's a way that we can partner with the organizations that are pretty deeply working with community on gardening to see what we can do in terms of increasing their maybe, capacity with additional rain barrels if they need them, or maybe they don't, maybe they're totally flush. I'm not exactly sure, but I think just exploring those conversations with the folks in the town who are already doing that work on the local agriculture scene and on the local food justice scene would be really, really great. Okay, I think that this looks awesome. And what we'll do is we'll share this out. It is shared out. Everybody has this strategic plan list, but we'll kind of save it as a PDF and include it in the next packet. Just so that way there's a record of it online. This is something that we had discussed and made some commitments to going forward. And I will check in along the time of the timeline with individuals who are named in this list to add agenda items to this meeting for updates in these areas.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. And I would encourage us to go through these goals, maybe with some of the same mentality as the city goals too. We do have like further something by expanding or by evaluating and just kind of see if those words all are the way we like them, as well as the city ones, and give some feedback on those.
Can we also keep this as a living document? So as we go through the process, we can update them accordingly. It doesn't really have to be locked down, right?
I think so.
I'm sure we will be updating. I mean, I know even when I added my goal to it, I slightly revised the goal that I'm working on. But it is kind of nice to go back to like any updates on, kind of where we're at on these things, just because I know we all are very busy.
So I would just say, I think that there's a concern that if we have living open docs, that they end up looking like we're having a very prolonged open meeting. So I would really.
No, I didn't mean at all times from what I was talking about. Sorry, I recognize it has to be locked down before we have to like unshare, right? Before we end the meeting.
I mean, yes, I agree with that. But what I'm wondering is maybe if there's updates or something that you've done or you've kept track of, like download it for yourself. Feel free to keep track of progress on your own. And if it becomes something that's like a publicly shareable progress update, then email that to me and Scott, and maybe just the two of us can update the list if we're going to use it in that way.
I'm wondering if the easiest way to do that is to actually just link it into this document. So you can have, whatever. I'm going to use my example of creating educational resources, and I could just have them linked there if I create a separate thing that I want shareable. So that way we're not having to change wording, or it's not another thing for a person to maintain. It's like, if you have your own kind of more micro plan that you're doing to accomplish something, or notes or whatever that needs to be a public thing, then you can just link it in there and just put like link to plan, or, I don't know, just throwing that out there so it doesn't become like overwhelming, and then it's still just kind of a plan on a page. And then if people want to dig deeper and see more specifics of a specific thing, then they can just click the link.
I think the thing is that we can't be continuing to work on this same document together outside of the meeting. So if we want to make a change, then just send it to Scott or Stacy, or bring it up at the meeting, and then we can all change it accordingly during the meeting.
I guess my point is that you wouldn't be changing this document. You would be creating your own separate document to then have linked in, which I guess one person would have to do that if that's the case. But just throwing that out there.
It's like one person having their own thing, and then they add it, combine it at the next meeting, right? Okay.
Whatever works best for everyone. I'm not trying to be contrarian whatsoever. Just throwing out an idea to just keep it from getting like crazy, so that, it's not accessible to peeps.
No. I totally understand. And I appreciate it. I think that the idea of linking in is a good one. Send me the link, maybe. I just don't want to get in trouble. I think that there are some folks out in the world who are looking at the business of the city and looking for gotcha moments that they can get on FOIA requests. So we just need to be cognizant as possible that we are not kind of all doing work together. That is why we have only a couple of people who are working on any particular item, just kind of on their own, especially as it ends up being back and related to business of the council. And we just need to be sort of cognizant and careful with that, with anything that goes on. But we can absolutely, use the PDF document, use the document for, our launching pad for doing some work that I want to recognize all of you for the commitment that you're making to the commission and the commitment that you are making to doing this work on your own as volunteers on top of your full-time jobs that go beyond the sort of once a month meeting commitments that we have here. So I just want to thank all of you for engaging in this process that we've gone through so far. At times, to me, it has definitely felt like, as we've gone through updating our bylaws to creating goals that we want to work on together, goals that we want the SAC to be working on, and creating priorities within our group for the changes that we want to see in our community. I have felt like we could have done this all in one weekend had we all just spent 16 hours together overnight in a conference room somewhere and hammered it all out. I know that it has taken over a year to get through it. A process meeting once a month process gets to be really pretty slow. So I just want to thank everybody for going through this process that we have done together, and I look forward to seeing the outcomes from the research and for some of the planning that's going to go into moving some of this forward. And with that, any other final or lasting comments on this exercise? Okay, I just want to celebrate with you all for working on this together and thank all of you for sticking with us. This was not an easy task. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I started going on my little monologue there, and I didn't mean that to be like moving us towards the end of the meeting, but it feels like that's what I've done, is moved us towards the end of the meeting. I don't believe we have any other agenda items for tonight. Let me know if I'm wrong. I think we're good. Okay, so with that, our next meeting is going to be next month on March 1st. I don't know what date it's going to be. It's going to be next week, first Tuesday in March, and I look forward to seeing you all then. With that, this meeting is adjourned.